This is going to be a very sprawling project. They're talking about developments lasting anywhere from, starting the next couple years all the way out to, 2030 and beyond. One slide that we saw basically divided it between west of I-37 in the Hemisfair area, that might be between 1 and 5 years, and then east side of I-37 over near the Alamo Dome, that could take anywhere from 6 to 15. One thing for sure though, the Spurs Arena is one of the first pieces that they want to have fall into place. Talking about starting construction as early as the spring of 2026, I would put it one of the first projects that we just listed out. I'd put it as one of the first to come into place, but there's a lot of stuff that they need to figure out right now. The city says they've done some feasibility studies, or they're still working on a lot of that, but a big question is still funding. That's one thing that we just hammered the mayor and the city manager on. Right now, they're saying, let's just talk about the Spurs Arena, because nothing has a hard price tag on it right now. All we know is this is probably going to be multi-billion dollars. This is probably going to be multi-billion-dollar development over the course of all of these projects. We don't have a hard price tag on anything in particular, but the Spurs Arena, for example, they don't think that's going to be an obligation on the general taxpayer. But again, this is kind of the city workaround on how they're talking about public funding, because some of the mechanisms they have mentioned, such as a venue tax that's currently the counties, that would be funded, they say, by people visiting the city, people renting cars and renting hotel rooms. But there are other tools that could be used, such as tax increment financing, something Myra Arthur has covered extensively. We've got more info on that on our website, but that could be one possibility for helping out. There's also a new project finance zone, which, similar to tax increment financing, takes a portion of the tax that's owed to the state and kicks it back into a bucket that the city could use for projects. So it's still tax dollars, it's just wouldn't be going to the state. And same thing with the tax increment financing. Instead of, they set the level down low for when an area first comes into existence, then however much more property tax they get out of that area, instead of going into the general fund to pay for roads, cops, firefighters, and everything else, it also gets set aside in another bucket to be used on projects within that area, basically using new development to pay for more development to build the area up. So these are going to be some complicated discussions, and we're not clear exactly yet how this is all going to be funded. Those are obviously the big questions that people have. But right now, what we do know is they're talking about a Spurs Arena at the site of the Institute of Texan Cultures. That's that southeast corner of Hemisfair, right on I-37, just across from the Alamo Dome. That's also the spot where they want to put a land bridge to connect the two sides. So it's a very impressive, very expansive project, this sports and entertainment district that the city's proposing, but they're going to be doing it in piecemeal, essentially bringing one project up as it comes, as the feasibility study's done, then figuring out the funding. So got a long way to go, but we do have a first look at what the city's envisioning for that downtown space.
Garrett, we talked this morning in our editorial meeting about how covering this project was going to be more of a marathon than a sprint, and it sounds a whole lot like developing it and answering some of those questions that are still out there might feel very much the same. So I'm glad you talked about the funding, or what we don't know about how this is all going to be paid for, and the location of the arena itself, because you're right, that is the aspect of this project that really is taking that center court, as you mentioned. And again, I know we were having some audio issues in the beginning, so for folks who are just joining us, this is what we're talking about, getting our very first look at what a new downtown entertainment and sports district could look like, which would feature a new arena for the Spurs in what is now the footprint of the Institute of Texan Cultures. That institute has moved out of there. They're looking for a new home. That was a move to make way for what this could be. And you're looking at a rendering that we just got of what it might actually look like. And Garrett, while you were talking, we put up some full screen graphics here showing, in this blue-green area, what wants to be developed, what they hope would be developed in the first 1 to 5 years. That red part would be 5 to potentially 15 years or plus later. So one of the many questions I feel like that still exist, okay, the Alamo Dome. It's where the Spurs were. They moved to the AT&T Center, to what is now the Frost Bank Center. Now we're looking at some big asks for renovations of the Alamo Dome. If we get a new arena for the Spurs right across from it, what's the Alamo Dome going to be used for? Is anyone talking about that right now?
They have it out. They have ideas for it. They want to attract those marquee events. They're telling one thing that they mentioned was when Bad Bunny came through town, he went to the Alamo Dome. When the Final Four's playing, it's at the Alamo Dome. They want bowl games at the Alamo Dome, but right now the way it's situated, it's not up to par for competing for some of those. Lori Houston, the assistant city manager who presented much of this plan, noted that Bad Bunny played there once, but when he came back through, he didn't play there again. So that's something they want to do. They feel that if they improve the Alamo Dome, they can attract those marquee events. The mayor mentioning that money that comes in from, say, the Final Four, that provides a lot of cash flushed into the local economy. And if they've got the Alamo Dome with 65,000 seats, they can bring a lot of butts to put in those seats, a lot of cash in those pockets, a lot of cash in you and I's pockets is the idea. Now, to get there, they need to improve it. We don't have an exact idea of what they're really looking to do. And I know when we show those renderings, we had several people back at the station saying, well, that looks kind of weird. But it was noted on there that the architectural firm that drew these up said these were for illustrative purposes. Those aren't the actual designs. So as you see them on your screen, don't get too attached or too disgusted. We don't know exactly what they're looking to do with the Alamo Dome, but I know that they especially want to add in some premium seating. That's a big ask for the NCAA, for example. But it sounds like they really want to attract those big events. But I think as we've seen before, the Spurs played at the Alamo Dome for a while, decided it didn't fit them. I don't think that, there's any push right now to put them there, for example.
So, Garrett, with all the hurdles that are involved potentially in this project, there is a historic nature to Hemisfair, of course. You've talked about that, I believe, just this very week, about how the Conservation Society of San Antonio, they don't want to see that ITC building razed. They want to see it preserved because of its historic nature. That's going to be another aspect of all this as well.
It is, but in all likelihood, that ITC building could very well be demolished. Now, there was a designation given to it as a state antiquities landmark. That gives it some protection, but because it's owned by the UT system, it's a university, institute of higher education, so it gets a little bit more leeway when it's asking to either change or get rid of a building like that. And it seems likely that the city and its partners are going to go forward with a plan to demolish it. There doesn't seem to be a place in their plans for the old ITC building that was unveiled in 1968 as the Texas Pavilion as part of the World's Fair. It was later used for the Institute of Texan Cultures. That's a UTSA museum, but the UTSA has since moved that museum out. They want a permanent home for the ITC somewhere closer to the Alamo. They say this building, it doesn't suit their needs. It requires tens of millions of dollars in upgrades, and if they were to try to repurpose it for something else, they have a funding gap of more than $80 million, at least what they've said publicly. So at this point, if they're pleading poverty or at least pleading economic hardship of we've got this building and we can't use it unless we shell out money through the nose, they may have a bit of an argument when it comes time to trying to get that building demolished. We don't know exactly where it stands at this point, though. I've reached out to the THC. I have not heard back whether or not anybody has asked for a permit for demolition.
So, Garrett, we know right now the Spurs, they have a home. They have a home in the Frost Bank Center. I believe their lease there is through 2032. But we heard the mayor today say that he thought it would be Pollyanna-ish to believe that they would be playing there in the year after. So I want to talk about that. We're going to take a quick break, though, because some other council members, I heard Jalen McKee Rodriguez bring up some concerns about that. That arena is in his district. So what happens if the Spurs move? What happens to the other arena that we have and is still in use right now? We're going to take a quick break. Stay with us. Garrett, we'll be back to you in just a minute. Welcome back to this KSAT live stream this afternoon. I'm Myra Arthur, where we are talking about the very latest details on the first time that the public is getting a glimpse of what could be a new sports and entertainment district in downtown San Antonio. And yes, that does include plans for a potential new Spurs arena across from the Alamo Dome, and major upgrades for the Alamo Dome and more. A new hotel, new music venue, a lot to be wrapped up into this plan. Our Garrett Brnger has been getting those details for us from City Hall this afternoon. Garrett, we talked a little bit earlier about a big question most of our viewers have asked us about. What about the cost? We don't have hard and fast numbers yet. It sounds like the city doesn't have those numbers to share either. So that is something TBD, as they say. I want to talk about the home that the Spurs do have right now. The AT&T Center became later the Frost Bank Center. We heard Councilman Jalen McKee Rodriguez, District 2 councilman, that's his district. He talked about if you leave the Frost Bank Center, leave it better than you found it. He was saying that it caught my attention when he said he was 4 years old when the AT&T Center was put into place, and yet he, as the council member there now, is still held accountable for what have turned out to be failed promises of economic development that we were all told would happen with the building of a new arena. So San Antonio, in a way, has been down a similar road before. Do we know what happens with the Frost Bank Center should this new arena come to fruition downtown?
No. Back to you. I'm just kidding. Right now, they are still trying to figure that out because that is a county property, and the city has said right now it wants to develop an MOU. That's a memorandum of understanding. It's an agreement between the county and the Spurs and the city on the framework for discussions going forward. Right now, the city said they've had some preliminary talks, but they haven't had something formal. And that's what they need to figure out. That is a county property. And of course, it's a city concern, especially if it's going to be viewed as taking away the arena from the east side and sticking yet another thing downtown. They're going to have some people scratching their heads and questioning what's the issue and what are you going to do for the arena you're leaving behind. So right now, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of answers or ideas specifically on what's going to happen with that. And that's something we heard from Councilman Jalen McKee Rodriguez. He said that he wants the same kind of careful thought and planning that has obviously gone into this sports and entertainment district so far to go into the plans for what happens next with the Frost Bank Center. Obviously, you can't just have 365-day rodeo, but hey, that might be interesting too.
That was something that Councilman McKee Rodriguez talked about, how the rodeo has said, we're interested in staying here, we're not going anywhere. I mean, they may be the second most permanent tenant with that space aside from the Spurs, but he was saying today he didn't want to see a 365 rodeo there on that footprint. So that's another big question in all of this. And I want to remind everybody that if you want to see the renderings, if you want to see information on what parts could be built when, as far as what we know so far, all of that info is on our website right now. You can click through some of the images there. Garrett, I appreciate you being here, and thanks for being so frank about the answer to what happens to the Frost Bank Center. Nobody knows. We don't know yet. So thanks for gathering that info, and we'll see if we can find some more answers to these lingering questions, especially when it comes to cost. Garrett, thanks for your time.
You got it.
Go through some of your responses. People have been sounding off about this today, of course, on social media, and we can take a look at some of that right now. So these are comments via the KSAT News Instagram. First viewer says here, what about fixing all the roads, investing in safer sidewalks, more light at night, schools, parks, and finishing the highways? Can we start there? Another viewer with a different point of view says, time for our city to step it up. We need to stop thinking small. Got a couple of other comments here. What's wrong with the Frost Bank Center or the Alamo Dome? Is there a high demand for another arena? Fix the highways. Traffic is awful. But somebody else reacting in a more positive way to these new renderings and ideas today. Very nice. Hopefully this arena brings San Antonio some more money. Money, of course, is the key question that has yet to be answered today. We're going to continue our marathon of asking those questions and covering this as this plan develops over the next few weeks, months, perhaps even longer. So we'll bring it to you as soon as we know some more information. I'm Myra Arthur here in the KSAT newsroom. Thanks for joining this live stream. We will have all this info again on our website if you want to click through those photos, the latest info about what we know on these plans, and we'll see you on air today at 5 o'clock.